more than 3/4 of the way through the primary season, and the presidential frontrunners from each party continue to be dogged by rivals with the same job title. Both Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, of course, are United States senators. That's just about the only part of their political biographies that they share. But it's going to be a pretty important thing to have in common if, in the end, Cruz doesn't come from behind to win the Republican nomination, and Sanders can't pull off his upset bid on the Democratic side. Each has 2 more years to go in his current Senate term. If they have to come back to their day jobs, they'd be joining a pretty exclusive club. In the past 4 decades, only 19 others have made life in the Senate their consolation prize after the voters said no to their national dreams. The good news is how most of those other folks made pretty productive lives for themselves. Al Gore had to bide his time for 4 years before winning promotion to vice president. Joe Biden had to wait less than 1 year. 4 others went on to cabinet positions. Howard Baker was a White House Chief of Staff, Lloyd Bentsen was Treasury Secretary, and both John Kerry and Hillary Clinton got to be Secretary of State. 2 Republicans went on to be elected Senate Majority Leader in the 1980s, first Baker and then Bob Dole, and both Dole and John McCain came back to win the GOP presidential nomination after return engagements in the Senate. These earlier presidential candidates also stayed in the Senate for an average of 9 years after first suspending a presidential quest. And a dozen, 7 Democrats, 5 Republicans, who have run in the caucuses and primaries since 1976 have gone on to head committees with big-time influence over domestic and foreign policy. Among them are 2 of the current chairmen. McCain runs Armed Services, while the finance capital belongs to Orrin Hatch, who got only as far as the last place showing in Iowa back in 2000. Rand Paul, who dropped out after Iowa this year, is the favorite for a second term in Kentucky, and then has an outside shot at becoming chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, if the GOP holds on to the Senate. Lindsey Graham isn't in line for any chairmanships just yet, and the most recent dropout, Marco Rubio, is leaving the Senate when his term ends this fall. Ted Cruz wouldn't have enough seniority to become a chairman in 2017, and at age 46, he would have to decide whether running for a second term in Texas and mending fences with his Republican colleagues was his best path towards someday taking another shot at the White House. But if the Democrats win the Senate without Sanders getting to move down to the Oval Office, his consolation prize will be the chairmanship of the Senate Budget Committee. That job means he'd be a key player in advancing or stopping whatever fiscal policies the new president proposes, at least until 2018. That's when Sanders will turn 77, and he'll have to decide whether he wants to go after a 3rd term up in Vermont. So keep an eye on how the most recent returners make use of their extra influence.